Thank you so much, Heidi and Sai. Awesome session. We touched on how we're addressing complexity across scaling data teams, dbt mesh, and new cloud CLI, and the revamped semantic layer. We are innovating to make your lives easier, the hundreds of you in the room and thousands online that represent our dbt community. We would not be here if it weren't for you. You inspire us, you definitely challenge us, and you make us better. So we continue to deliver for you. Now, I'm pleased to introduce our first spotlight speaker, Jay Parmar from Snowflake. Welcome, Jay.
Can you hear me okay? You want to hear me in the back? Fantastic. Hi there, my name is Jay Parmar. I'm a senior architect in Snowflake Professional Services, and I will classify myself as a data mesh practitioner. And there's some of the reasons why, but I'll get to that in a minute. So data mesh has been one of those fundamental things in the data community whereby it's actually started to proliferate between all the different areas of the organization. It goes through technology, it goes through people and process. But one of the key things that end up happening is the main reason why it's so successful is because of the fact that it removes the boundaries that actually occur through a centralized approach. So when you start decentralizing and you start working with multiple different teams, your time to value massively decreases. You don't actually have those bottlenecks. So in this part of this session today, I'll be using how Snowflake can be used with the use of data products and distributed domains on delivering value. So let's talk about our data mesh references. So as you can see here, over the last 2.5 years since the data mesh engagements have been happening, we've got over 100 engagements, we've got dozens of clients in production today, and it works across all verticals. We also had a summit today, last year, is presentation of the AstraZeneca, Sanofi, DirecTV, and Siemens as well, which is great. So as part of that, we've gone through all these different things, and these are all reference customers. What did we learn from them? So actually, as part of building these type of domains and you build these data products, there's a lot of different focuses that need to be focused on. Let me say that again. There needs to be a number of different areas that need to be focused on. And these are the areas in general form that need to be looked into. The first one is the fact that it's organizational change. It's not just the technology side. That's actually the easiest part of building data products and building data domains. Actually, it's the people and process side, which is really, really fundamental in terms of getting that right. If that's not right, things don't work very well. Define your data ownerships, look at the RACI, look at what the boundary contexts are in terms of what you're building. Define incentives and KPIs for your data teams. One of the things about the incentives and KPIs from a data product perspective is something we call DATSIS in the data mesh community. So a data product needs to be like discoverable, addressable, trustworthy, self-describing, interoperable, and secure. So these are some of the things just to be aware of, and that's just from a data product perspective. That builds additional KPIs for your actually teams as well. Obviously, you have to be pragmatic. Things that might not go well very first time, that's true, and you need to re-engineer, and that's perfectly acceptable. You're not expected to get it right every single time, and at least first time. Then you've got the Snowflake ecosystem. Obviously, when you're working with Snowflake, you're building your capabilities on the platform, leverage third-party tooling. Obviously, dbt is great. It's leveraging our platform humongously. And obviously, from a process from dbt, we just talked about in data from a dbt mesh perspective, standardize and automate. Build things regarding CI/CD. That really does drive a lot of efficiencies in reducing that time to value from X to Y to Z. And ultimately, at the end of the day, is business value is the most important thing that's being delivered as part of the engineering effort. Look at build governance into the process. Governance is really important. Obviously, we need to make sure our PI fields are actually managed in appropriate conditions. Make sure the different domain teams are leveraging that, looking at what's part of that process. Look at which InfoSec team need to specify what specific standards and how do you cross-communicate between different fields. Like you might have a PI for a customer name on one side, you might have another one on another side, but if you use two different hashing algorithms, you're going to get into a problem to join them together. So there's certain things that you need to be aware of. And the last thing is the self-service piece, right? we want to make things as easy as possible. And at least from a Snowflake platform perspective, at least from the storage compute side, we do that really well. You don't have to worry about the bells and whistles. Literally just get to work, and it continuously works for you. So as part of that process, what is it then? How do we start working with this? So ultimately, Snowflake's a distributed platform, and the way this works is a number of different things. You've got your Snowflake accounts, which you see in the blue section. Each account is in a different area. So you've got US East, you've got Singapore, and you've also got one in another region, and that's GCP. Ultimately, we cross-cloud, and we have Snowflake organization going on all of that, and that's a capability of being able to just click a button and say, I want an account in one region and this location, and it's done for you, and it's spun up. So, and one thing to talk about is you can easily share data between them, and I'm going to get to that in a minute. One of the ways to actually look at data products and data capabilities about what assets you have within your organization is something what we call our private marketplace. This marketplace itself is an area, or it's a tool, where you can go in, look at all the different data products that you have, or data assets you have within your organization, only within your organization. This is not the public realm, this is your private marketplace in your organization. First thing you would do is you publish your data asset that you produce, put it onto the marketplace. Then someone else that wants to look at, okay, I want to have access to this data. How do I gain access to it? First, I go to the marketplace, see what's available, discover what's there. So actually, I like this data product, or I like this data asset. And so, can I have access to it? What would happen is that the initial data domain that owns that will get a notification saying, yes, they can have it. If it's a standard one, it will automatically provision for you. If there needs to be some PII capabilities need to be defined as part of that process, it's a bit more involved, so therefore it gets a request. Then someone then says, does an outbound share to the consumer side from a producer perspective. And one good thing is the data never moves. It stays in the location and sharing's done. So then you can start building your data pipelines directly from that inbound share and start moving forward. And the next thing is how you build those different data domains and those bounded contexts within the ecosystem. So in Snowflake, what we have is we've got a Snowflake account, and within a single account, you'll also have a Snowflake database. And what you can define as part of the Snowflake database is you can have those as part of your domain teams and your domain environments themselves. Each domain will build a data product. In the data mesh world is what we call potentially a source-oriented data product, which is more towards the source side, and the consumer side is more about who's using that data. So it's a consumer-oriented data products. So in this case, you can have different databases sharing different data sets with different domains in a different database, which is quite easy to do. But the next thing is to actually start working an account per domain. And this has certain benefits as well. Obviously, from a cost and FinOps perspective, it makes it easier because it's a line item for every account. But pretty much what ends up happening, you've got different capabilities. So in this case, you can take one account, which is your data domain. They control the entire account. They share data with that to another account, which then requests access to it. And that's the same thing as I talked about data share previously. The database side uses RBAC, which is a roles-based access control. And through the account per domain uses data sharing. Both of those options don't move any data. They all stay where they are. And with SnowGrid, what we have today is you can have accounts in every region and every location globally. And this is a massive capability which allows you to be cross-cloud, cross-geographic regions. So keep that in mind when you're looking at, because there's certain situations you might need it from a security perspective and data residency issues. So those are things that are really important to keep track of. But ultimately, you can have a Snowflake account anywhere. Last bit is to do with partner tools and services. Pretty much leverage the Snowflake platform as much as you can. There's a lot of warehouse and compute that's available on Snowflake itself. And a lot of the partner tools that we have, like dbt and other partners that we have, all make use of this and making sure that you get the right processing for your right time at the right cost. And we've got different capabilities of data catalogs, automation tools, DevOps, and observability. So these are some of the lessons learned that we've noticed while building things with data mesh and dbt. Data mesh is not a silver bullet. It's not something that you actually think, okay, you can just build it and it's going to work. It doesn't work that way. There's a lot of people and process involved. setting up a hub and spoke model when working with building domain teams and building technology, that's actually really important. If you're not familiar with the hub and spoke model, is where you have a central potential team that actually builds the solutions first, and it gets pushed out to your domain teams. And usually when you first start this off, what ends up happening is that it's just the first domain team is usually the hub that builds everything for them. And they start building these processes, and they build these models. They then start saying, okay, how do I then put security, governance, and so on into the process? Once they get down to the point in saying, actually, I'm happy with this, and it's delivering value for my use case, which initially was set up for my first domain team, then what ends up happening is then say, I'm happy, move it to a different team. Then the other team turns around and goes, oh, it doesn't really work for us. So how do I then change it? So then that feedback comes into the hub again, and they make changes, and constantly keep doing that as part of the process. So then every single time a new spoke happens, which is a new domain, they leverage the benefits of everyone. Build a data ops capability with DBT, and I think it's already been mentioned as part of DBT Mesh, is that data ops is one of the fundamental things to drive time to value. So ensure the fact that you leverage that, use Snowflake's cloning to actually deliver value. There's no one-fit solution, I'll get to that later, and build data governance into the model themselves. So with Snowflake's dynamic data masking policies, you can build that directly in, attach it, and you're good to go. So you have your models built in with data governance all included. So one of the examples I'm going to give you today is Flexport. It's a massive provider of logistics infrastructure and software. They initially did a couple of things. They first did a database migration, which is pretty much taking the existing solution across to Snowflake, which is great, and it worked, but it's a centralized approach. Then they decided, oh, I'm not really happy about that. It doesn't allow me to drive value quickly. So they started thinking about a decentralized approach. So they started on the one side of the fence, looking at a service-oriented architecture, and they started building the patterns on one side of the fence, but decided on the data side, we're not really working with that. Let's change that too. Then they started building data mesh. And this is an example of what they built today. Is they took the Event Hub bus, they then built source-oriented data products, which you see there with DBT. Obviously, this is an ELT approach, so therefore they extracted and loaded all the data in. Then on top of that, once they built their source-oriented data products, they made it available to the wider ecosystem within the organization. Then other parts of the organization started building their marts and consumer-oriented data products for their customers. The one thing that happened off the back of this, they also created a golden layer, which is the EDW layer off the back of it, which consolidated all the data across all the organization, and then finally produced one EDW layer, which is a separate database. But let's talk, on this slide here, let's focus on the middle bit. They pretty much looked at DBT and said, how do I start working in 3 different areas? Governance, observability, right, and profiling. So in this case, you'll see right in the middle, they've got the storage and serving layer, which is Snowflake. Then on top of it, you've got your DBT transformation layer. Observability was done with hooks and tests. They started building dynamic data masking policies and tagging policies as part of the security admin role, which they started building into the process. And finally, they started profiling the data to ensure that they understand what's going on with the data sets and making sure there's no data quality issues. And the last example on this one is another customer that we have, which started using the data mesh as well. But they built everything on DBT. They built the source-oriented data products. They built the consumer-oriented data products. They tailored it to the agency in question. So this example is an agency, which is a worldwide agency, multiple different agencies that they have internally. They built a client bespoke model in DBT. They then used data sharing in Snowflake to pass that to the different accounts in Snowflake, which this organization had multiples of. And you can see at the top is where each of those specific bespoke client models were shared to. So as part of Snowflake and Data Mesh, please take a look at the website for our details about what goes on and how we've done Data Mesh for other customers, building data products and sharing them. And thank you very much.